let's take a look at the markets now. First of all, on the east of the continent, in East Africa, if we look at the Nairobi Stock Exchange, the NSE 20, up by 147 points there on towards the end of the week. Quite a big jump there for the NSE at 3%. And then the shilling on Thursday, 85.45. Now, of course, we want to talk about the effect on the currency and on the stock exchange of the decision over the weekend, which has ratified the presidential election. So to talk about that, firstly, let's go to Eric Musau, who is research analyst at Standard Investment Bank in Nairobi. Good morning, Eric. I sense a relief generally at the validation of the presidential election. No runoff, no uncertainty, no second election, although we did have reports of some violence, nothing like the previous election.
Yes, certainly. I think the markets today will be quite happy, and we'll probably see a cheer rally on the back of those the Supreme Court ruling. I think on the whole, the political divide was comfortable with the outcome. I think now the decision is the main effort now will be on the government to sort of set the tone in terms of the development agenda.
What are we expecting there? And we talked last week about the new constitution, the devolution of power. I mean, it's easier said than done, simply to say you're going to move more authority to the regions. Obviously, there are budgetary issues. There's the issue of central government departments giving up power to regions, moving bureaucracies around. One might have worse administration rather than better administration as the new system settles in.
And that's true, but I think we already have a very good foundation with regards to the new constitution. It sets clear limits with regards to how much revenue is allocated to the county governments, and that's 15%. Obviously, the elected leaders in those specific regions will have the responsibility to take up their roles in order to achieve the objectives. Some county government might not do as well as others, but on the whole, I think the overall momentum is positive. And if you look at some of the governors elected, in fact, most of them are actually from the corporate sector. And that tells you that we're likely to see a bit of professionalism injected into the county government, which in essence will be positive for the country.
Now, your colleagues last week that we spoke to were saying you actually couldn't call what way the judgment would go from the Supreme Court. It has turned out to be unanimous. What about the market? Has the market, do you expect it to react this week to this news, or had it priced it in? Did the market know better than the analysts in this case?
If you look at the bellwether stocks, even during the period of uncertainty where we didn't really know for sure which side the Supreme Court was going to rule, the bellwether stocks continue to do very well. So the main companies which really drive the Kenyan economy continue to do well. We expect a cheer rally this week, or at least today. But beyond that, I think it will really depend on how the government sets the agenda. There's a lot in terms of spending that needs to be done, especially if you look at the Jubilee Manifesto, which is essentially the government which has won the day. They have a lot of promises, so we need to temper those promises with regards to spending, how much borrowing is going to be made, and so forth. So it's a delicate balance, but I think if you look at the professionalism already in the government, at least during the campaigns, I think the market would be positive with regards to how it's going to be done going forward.
Well, there was quite a good gain on at the end of last week, a 4-day week, of course, before the long weekend, more than 3% up. Looking at a couple of the shares there that moved towards the end of the week, Eric, the National Bank up nearly 9%, 8.5% to 9% to 22 shillings, and the Equity Bank, the top mover in the sector, though the price remained level. So banks are of interest to investors at the moment.
Yes, you mentioned their national bank, and I think that was merely a relief rally. I mean, it had gone down quite a bit because it reported quite disappointing numbers. But I think investors sort of started looking at the bank again and looking at the outlook, and overall, I guess they read some positive momentum, given the new MD. So overall, the market started coming back up. And the banks are always sort of at the first phase when you're seeing a recovery or the market starting to move. And you expect that to continue across the sector. Obviously, the numbers will really be very key going forward because we've seen a number of companies issuing profit warnings. And that's not good, if you look 6 months, 12 months down the line. And so for us, what we are concerned is to ensure that the companies which are listed continue to deliver solid numbers, and that's really what's going to sustain this rally.
Another company that's always interesting is East African Breweries, and apparently analysts are saying that share is overvalued by 100 shillings a share. Now, they say the price should be about 200 shillings a share. Is the market wrong? Why are these analysts saying it's overvalued?
Well, we have a fair value of around 200, and it's trading around 315 or thereabout. And yeah, probably the consensus is around that level. If you look at this year's profitability, it's obviously not going to be very good. Some one-off profits last year would not be coming in this year. And then also you have the finance cost because they borrowed a lot to sort of make additional investments. But if you look at the foreign investors, when they're buying, they're looking for liquid counters. And, no one ever got fired for buying a company such as East Africa Breweries. So I think at the end of the day, this is a solid counter. Long term, it's going to deliver good numbers. Obviously, we really wait to see whether we'll see a correction on that stock, but it's held on pretty steady for quite a prolonged period.
It is a competitive sector, and of course, those companies will be looking to gain market share. They could all grow, but some of them would be wanting to gain even more through market share in an economy that's growing. So this is a good time to get the capital expenditure in place and to position for that growth.
Yes, certainly. And I think those buying into East African Breweries, that's what they are reading. And if you look at some of the Alcoholic Drinks Control Act, I mean, currently the East African Breweries is contesting that in court. But if you look at some of the regulations in there, in fact, it might mean that companies which are more financially positioned in terms of capital will be better able to survive in the regulatory environment. In fact, smaller players might find it a lot more challenging to actually compete in the new environment. So yes, I mean, if you have a big market position and the market is growing, I mean, certainly across East Africa, challenges might be there, but longer term, I think the outlook still remains positive.
And just to finish off our chat, Eric, electricity is very much on our minds in the south of the continent. We're worried, as we said a moment ago in our opening remarks, we're worried about load shedding, as we call it here, power cuts, to be more blunt, in the coming winter because of our supply not being able to match demand. But there's a report about your black market in electricity, and it's a big problem, theft of electricity.
Yes, particularly in the slum areas, I think that's the area which has been highlighted more significantly. So the slum areas, that has been a big concern. The Kenya Power has been, the electricity distributor has been working hard to sort of ensure power to the slum areas is actually normalized, and it's actually provided in a safe way and in a way that is also affordable to the large populations living in these areas. Obviously also we have to look at the other side in terms of ensuring that there's affordable power. And if you look at the capital expenditure plans by Kenyan, the electricity producer, then you're seeing tariffs likely inching forward. If you look at the capital expenditure programs, and so for the manufacturers in the country and the consumers, it's a big concern. I think the government recognizes that, and I guess we'll probably see some effort being put in that direction.
Well, they'll certainly need a lot more effort, and it looks as if Kenya Power is having to do the job on its own. It doesn't appear that the police or the authorities generally are able to do it. As in South Africa, we've got a campaign here about electrocutions with people who steal electricity. Is there any amount being put on this? I mean, how many billions of shillings this could be costing the country? What proportion of the electricity is being stolen?
I think the last time we had figures, we had probably 15 to 20% loss. So it's a significant loss on the part of Kenya Power in terms of what is lost within its infrastructure and what is actually siphoned out. So there is the issue of upgrading its infrastructure to ensure that you reduce these losses, and there is the issue of ensuring that you don't have people tapping the power to illegally use it. So yeah, in total, it's actually almost 1/5 of the total electricity actually sold to Kenya Power, and it's a big part. And you know, it's something Kenya Power has been working on. We've seen them investing quite a lot, as well as the partnerships. If you look at the government, sometimes is able to guarantee some of the credit provided to Kenya Power as the two main electricity providers in Kenya listed. There is a limit to what extent the government can actually participate actively on an arm's length basis.